Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the new member spring training number 2. Our president, Rod McLean, has posted the link to the other webinar from last week on replay. So if you missed the first one, no worries, go to our forum, since most of you guys who are here, I believe, are actually members. So this is, as you notice, a webinar format. So while it's largely a presentation to you, you can feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function. You can chat using the chat function. I probably won't see that as fast. The Q&A helps me keep track of all of that, and we'll be able to answer those questions live. So hope you guys are doing well tonight. I'm sure this isn't the first Zoom that you've been a part of for this COVID-19 craziness, but I'm glad that you guys are here with me on a Monday night. So what's our plan for today? We are going to recap the hype in case you need a reminder of why we're here, why we want to officiate. We're going to quickly review some of the details, and then we're going to dive in to how to use some of the resources and give you some of those tools that between now and football season, you can start digging in, you can start getting ahead. So a little bit about me, if we haven't talked yet, my name is Matt Holmquist. I've been officiating at the high school level and above for about 8 years, coming up on season 9. Not counted in those years. I officiated some Pop Warner when I was in high school. That was really where I dug my teeth into officiating and got the bug. I work line of scrimmage. I work line judge in high school. I work headline judge in college. And this will be my second season helping out with the new officials class. And so I really love doing this, love talking football. And so I'm excited to be with you guys tonight. So the schedule for any new members, you're here at the info sessions, and we're going to call them spring trainings. I didn't realize we also had info sessions specifically dedicated for those who have not yet joined. So hopefully everybody who's here has joined. If not, get with me. We'll figure out that process. But it's even better that most of you guys here are already members, because we're going to dive in under the assumption that you're in it for the long haul, you're committed to this fall, and our training is slated to start in June, and then we'll continue along our normal schedule for the remainder of the fall. And that's tentative. We'll see about, sometimes the chapter can flex things around, so that's our tentative dates. You'll get notifications, and it will be posted on the website when those actually will begin. So like I said before, we're going to kind of review the hype a little bit. We love officiating. We're going to continue to be excited and geeked out as long as you let us. We discussed kind of how much you make on a given night of games last week, which is plenty. It's enough to get fully compensated for being able to get out there and officiate some games. It's not only compensation; it's some good change if you work some games, but while you do have a pretty solid net profit at the end of the year, most of us don't do it for the money. If you find the people in it for the money, they're probably not the nicest, wonderfulest officials to be around. We talked about how this is a year-round commitment. We work hard preseason, we continue to study in season even as we work games, and then off-season comes and we hit it hard again. So get ready, this is a commitment. And finally, as you advance, there's a bunch of different factors that depend on, how are you going to advance into the varsity ranks? How many games are you going to get? There's a bunch of factors that go into it, but we want you to control what you can control. Learn the rules, learn the mechanics, stay in shape, and be patient. Because sometimes at the end of the day, when you're wondering, why haven't I moved up yet? Sometimes you just need more snaps. And like I said, hopefully most of you guys have done this already, but if not, the next steps, you'll hit up Fort Worth officials, FWFO.org and TASO.org. You'll pay our $30 chapter fee for first-year members, the $40 TASO fee. Download that rulebook. You will be receiving a physical rulebook, but until then, you can download a free PDF at ncaa.org. You can also just Google NCAA football rulebook. You'll find that, and you'll download it, PDF. And then lastly, we have a mentorship program, but we find that really you get out what you put in. And so just a little bit about this. One thing I will say about football, everyone is trying to move up. So it can feel a little competitive sometimes, that you're kind of jockeying for, man, who's going to get that next game. But as Fort Worth is one of the largest chapters in the state and even the country, there's a ton of people, which can be a good and bad thing. The good part is that there's a lot of people who are willing to help, and hopefully you've already gotten connected with some of those. And the not so great is that sometimes they can feel a little bit intimidating. So our goal here is that you don't get lost in the shuffle. And the best advice I have for you guys right now is stay connected, stay in touch with the network. Find those people that you trust who have already reached out to you. Ask questions again if you haven't heard back. I know most of you have already heard from Curtis. Consider him one of those trusted advisors. He's awesome. Please consider me one as well. I'll put my email up at the end. Stay in touch if you feel lost. Don't let yourself get lost in the fray. But you'll find that once you get into things, it's really just a big family, and everyone wants everyone else to succeed, even though it can feel a little bit intimidating at first. So I wanted to throw that out there. Stay in touch. You got this. All right, here it is, the rule book. This is your best resource, and we talked about it briefly last week, but this week we really wanted to give you some tools, how to use it, how to get started. So let's go. The rule book is broken down into rules, but no, really. Each different large section in this book is called a rule, and there's 12 of them. So let's take a look at what categories they cover. And it really helps to get familiar with all of these different categories to increase, man, how fast can I find something? Where do I go to look for it? Rule 1 talks about the game, the field, the players, the equipment. These are things that officials should probably know, but we don't have a whole lot of control over them. If you get out there and the stripes on the field are not wide enough, you're not going to throw a flag, shut the game down, and say, hey, I need someone to get out here and paint these hashes correctly. We're going to play the game. Those are things you might report to the chapter leadership, etc. But these are just kind of good to know guidelines, rule 1. Rule 2. Hopefully you will live in rule 2. These are all about definitions, and they're alphabetical. So if there's a word that you want to define, check out rule 2. You will come back to rule 2 a lot. Rule 3, the periods, time factors, substitutions. Rule 4 talks about when does the ball become in play, when is it a dead ball, when it is out of bounds. Rule 5 talks about series of downs, continuity of downs, lines to gain. That's first downs. Rule 6 talks about kicks, one of the hardest rules in the book. Rule 7 is snapping and passing the ball. So these are requirements before the snap, requirements after the snap, what happens when you're passing the ball. Pass interference is mentioned in Rule 7. Rule 8 talks about scoring, touchdowns, safeties, talks about touchbacks. It talks about all the different ways you can score field goals. Rule 9, conduct of players and others subject to the rules. So these are where you're going to find your personal fouls, your blindside blocks, your block below the waist, the unsportsmanlike conduct. Any of those big fouls you're going to find in Rule 9. Rule 10, penalty enforcement. You will also spend a lot of time in penalty enforcement. It's just one of those things. When there's a foul, you have to enforce the penalty. It's quite complicated to get there. Rule 10 helps you know how to do that. Rule 11 is the officials' jurisdiction and their duties. And then Rule 12 is instant replay. So you can cross out Rule 12. That's a nice to know. We do not currently use that in high school football. There's a little bit going on at the championship level, but other than that, no replay currently in Texas high school football. So as you read the rule book, I pulled one of the pages here. Let's look at the format. They kept the PDF version pretty much the same as the printed version. And I like this. If you're a visually oriented person, you can kind of remember what part of the page something is on. And there's certain references that you'll find yourself remembering. So let's look at how to find the rule reference. So at the top of the page there, we see Rule 9, conduct of players and others subject to the rules. All right, so Rule 9, got Section 3, we've got articles, and then below the articles, we've got letters and numbers and sometimes more letters. And so this is Rule 933A1A. And so you can find your way around the rule book that way. You'll also find in the different sections and articles, you'll find exceptions. And you can see one right there in 931, there's an exception, and that will take you to Rule 6. So the players of either team may block opponents, provided it is not pass interference or interference with the opportunity to catch a kick or personal foul. So the exceptions to this are in Rule 6, which if you recall, those are kicks. So you can go take a look at the exceptions to when you can block opponents based on kicking plays. And then you'll also find penalties. And those penalties are 5 yards. Well, not all of them are. You'll see the penalty for helping the ball carrier, which you will almost never see, so please don't call that. But the penalty stated there is 5 yards. So you'll have penalty statements throughout the rulebook. As you continue to read the rulebook, you'll also notice that some of the text is highlighted in blue, and these are rule administrative changes. And in the beginning of your career, these may not mean a lot to you right away. And I think it's probably easier for you to learn things brand new in year one than it is for another official who's been working under a different set of rules and now has to adjust to a rules change. So, while a change may make perfect sense to you, it's good to know what's new. That way you can sympathize with other officials, you can relate better to coaches and players as they're trying to adapt to the change. All right, so let's go through a little bit of an exercise here. You'll see that I am in Rule 7, so we're snapping, passing the ball. So look with me at Section 1, Article 2A. So 7.1.2a. Did you find it? That's right there, talking about a shift. So the first thing I see is that a couple of my terms give me rule references that I'll need to look up to better understand what's even inside this rule. So you can go define what a huddle is and what a shift is. And it'll take you to Rule 2, what's Rule 2? That's right, definitions. So I go find the definition of a huddle, I go find the definition of a shift. Cool, now I know. After a huddle or a shift, we know what those are after we've looked them up. And before the snap, all Team A players must come to an absolute stop and remain stationary in their positions without movement of the feet, body, head, or arms for at least 1 full second before the ball is snapped. All right, so we got to the end of that rule, great. None of those other things really confuse me, so I don't really need to go cross-reference them anywhere. Great. Well, what am I gonna see right here in parentheses? That says AR 7121. That is an approved ruling. And approved rulings are the second half of the rule book. So if I've got my physical rule book, I'm gonna turn to the second half. If I've got my PDF, I'm gonna scroll like a madman, and I go find rules 7.1.21 in the approved rulings. Before we get into that, look down at the bottom there. You'll see FR for the rules and FI for the interpretations, the approved rulings. So now let's take a look at approved ruling 7.1.2. So after a huddle or shift, we know those definitions because we checked them out in Rule 2. Players come to a stop and remain stationary for 1 second. Then, before the snap, 2 or more simultaneously change their positions, which is one of the definitions of a shift. So we know from reading our rule that since they have now shifted, they must now all come to a complete stop for 1 second before the snap. And then in the ruling, it tells us the same. All Team A players must again stop for 1 second before the snap. Otherwise, it's a live ball foul at the snap for an illegal shift. The penalty is 5 yards from the previous spot, and hey, it gives us another rule reference. So you can kind of jump back and forth. You can start with the approved rulings, go all the way through, find a bunch of different play scenarios, and it will take you back to where you can find the original source in the rules section of the FRs. So you can start from either direction as you bounce around. You'll get better at navigating as you go. So terminology, as we read the rule book, as we officiate, we try to officiate a precise game, and using the correct terminology keeps things clear, and it keeps you from making silly mistakes. It helps us all know that we're talking about the same thing. So let's look at one of the examples of that. So Team A is the team that puts the ball in play. Team B is the opponent. Now, why are we gonna make it technical like this? Why can't we just say offense and defense? Well, offense is the team currently in possession of the ball. The defense is the team not currently in possession of the ball. So therefore, we could have team A and team B on offense and defense at different times during the same down. So if we're working through a rules question, if we're trying to talk to each other about a scenario where, well, hey, the offense threw an interception and then the defense picked it off and then the new offense started running and the new offense held and then the defense, who was the offense, it just gets confusing. So we use team A, team B. They retain those designations until the ball is next ready for play. So you'll learn about what being ready for play means, but basically that just means from that snap all the way till they're ready to snap it again, we're going to use A and B. That way, hey, the play ends, we've had a change of possession, one team punches the other team, we know which team it is. Another one is a player. A player is any one of the participants in the game who is not a substitute or replaced player. So a player standing on the sideline is not a player, they're a squad member. So that's kind of another funky definition there. Another one is foul and penalty. So what's the difference? You kind of hear these thrown out at the same time. Foul is to penalty as crime is to punishment. So the definition of a foul in Rule 2 is a rule infraction for which a penalty is prescribed. And a penalty is a result imposed by rule against the team that has committed a foul. All right, so you did the crime, you committed a foul. As a result, you get a penalty. All right, so I did not commit a penalty by holding, I committed a foul. The 10-yard penalty is not a foul, it's the penalty. So holding is a 10-yard penalty. Illegal forward pass has a penalty of 5 yards and a loss of down. What else might we hear? How about flag? You don't commit a flag, right? When someone holds, it's, oh man, they committed a flag. Nope, they committed a foul. They have a penalty, and the flag is the tool that we use to mark the spot of the foul. So keep these separate. This is not so that you can go out there and the coach says, man, why are you throwing so many penalties? And you go, oh, actually, coach, that's called a flag. We threw a lot of flags because you committed fouls and you got penalty. That's not going to go over well. So don't be that guy. Don't get out there and show the coach how many definitions you know. This is for us to communicate with each other, for us to know as we're working through rules questions and on the field with each other. We want to keep things clear, but when we're relating to people, we don't want to be the know-it-all. All right, what's another tool? We've got the mechanics manual. So once you get into that TASO members portal, then you're going to find a link to click on these mechanics manuals. So you'll see the 3, 4, 5, and 7-man mechanics manuals. And it looks like as well as links to the NCAA site and the rule books. So the mechanics manuals that you'll need the soonest will be 3- and 4-man mechanics. These are sub-varsity games you'll be working, and down the road you'll learn the 5 and 7. And we'll teach these in the class, but it's imperative that you start to familiarize yourself with the mechanics manuals before you hit the field your first time. So let's take a look at, I pulled up the 3-man mechanics manual. Let's take a look at some of it. So we've got our classic table of contents. Great place to start. Find the general principles, the standard uniform. Hey, where do I find kicks, field goals? What do I do during a timeout? What happens if there's a measurement? Don't have a measurement. Just kidding. If there's a measurement, what do I do? Let's look at plays from scrimmage. So this is section 10. And one of the biggest aspects about mechanics that you'll hear is your basic position. Some people also call this initial positioning. And this is key because you really want to get in the right position to start out. Sometimes it will depend on a yard line. Sometimes it depends on the ball. Sometimes it depends on the players. You'll see that it breaks down your mechanics by referee, head linesman, and line judge. So the 3 different positions on a Tuesday, Thursday night. You're out there working with 3-man mechanics. Those are the 3 positions you're working. This is where you should start. You'll go through your basic positions, the duties before the ball snapped. The next few pages talk about what to do after the ball snapped, how you're going to move down the field, how far to move, when do you stop, that type of thing. So it's really key to learn what these are looking at. You'll find that most of the time, when you're in the right position and looking in the right place, you get the call right. We find that when we miss the fouls or we throw fouls that we shouldn't, it almost always comes down to a breakdown in mechanics or a breakdown in focus. And so mechanics help show you where you need to be and where you need to be looking and focusing. So the people who deviate from this, these are either people who have been doing something else differently for so long, or these are people who have not figured out that there is a change. Tasso updates these constantly for a reason. They really want to get the current mechanics out to put us in the best position to see the right things. So if you come up against someone who, man, they're just adamant about using a different mechanic for the night, you don't want to cause too many problems, but you can discuss that with your mentor, someone else from the chapter. Another different aspect of mechanics we can look at is scrimmage kicks. Just another example, you've got your graphic at the top, you've got positions before the snap, your initial positioning, like I said, and you'll see this is one of those instances where you'll key off of a player rather than a position on the field. And so you'll see the line judge will shuffle down the field, they'll take a position widest of the deepest receiver, and then they're going to adjust to a play. So it's just kind of another example there. So the film review, this is another aspect of what we do. Because this webinar is being recorded for replay at a public link, I don't want to show any actual film today of teams and fouls and what should and shouldn't have happened, but I did want to get you pumped up for the fact that when we were in class, we try to go over a lot of film. And so our strategy for that is less focusing on what happened, which from a fan's point of view, that's all that matters. What happened? What should have happened? Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? If we stop there, we get bogged down and we don't learn as much as we can. So we're looking at the film to break it down, figure out what can we learn from this play. So our strategy there, we watch the play through, we figure out who should be looking where. And I mentioned this already a couple times just in passing, but keys are something you'll learn about. A key is really the player or players that you start out looking at, and then you come off of those keys and look at other players on the field depending on what happens. Does someone cross? Does a player come right at you? Is it a run? Is it a pass? The keys help you focus on something small to begin with and then read the play and adjust from there. So we go over film so that you can develop sort of that eye mechanics, those muscle memories in your eyes before you get out there on the field. We talk about what rules are involved on the play. We talk about what the correct mechanics could be on the play. Could we have been in a better position to see what we should have seen? And this is most of what we're looking at on film. Because like I said, we miss stuff when we break down our mechanics. We miss stuff when we break down our focus. So can we solidify that in film study before we get out there on the field? Another aspect are rules tests. These are great ways to stay sharp. They're all over the place. They're readily accessible. One of the resources that I'll mention here in a little bit, you can find a ton of them out there. They're great ways. I would say try to challenge yourself to closed book answers. There are some times where you're going to compete and you're going to try to, get the best score on those tests, but that's not for a while in your career. Right now, you want to learn, you want to get better, and the best way to challenge yourself is by coming up with those closed book answers and then checking yourself against the rule book. The other thing you can do is come up with your own scenarios. And I found this to be really helpful. When I'm learning something, I'm going to write a question based off of it. If I'm learning about blocks below the waist, I'm going to write a couple different scenarios where it is a foul. I'm going to write a couple different scenarios where it's not a foul, just so I can solidify in my own mind, kind of answer my own test questions, if you will. So as you look through these, you'll see that they're in the format of team, down and distance, line to gain, and clock status. These are all things that we need to know when we're on the field, so we get ourselves trained to think about it off the field when we're looking at those rules tests. So let's go through one. Our question, we've got A, 1st and 10 at the A35 with the clock running. Prior to the snap, tackle A74 jumps up to start blocking. Defensive tackle B99 subsequently runs across the neutral zone. So what do we have here? Most people could take a look at this and tell you we have a false start. So false start comes with a 5-yard penalty. We're going to back team A up 5 yards. So we have the team, the down and the distance, the line to gain, or the place where we're going to snap the ball next, which is the 30, and the clock status. Our line to gain here is still the A45 if you're tracking with that. But this helps you get ready for actually working it on the field. We'll talk about clock status a little bit more, but that's kind of how you would run through a play with a test scenario. What if? Man, these what ifs are the fun ones. We get these from friends. They're like, oh man, you're a football official. Well, what if this happened? What happens when, if we come up with these ourselves, you know, what happens if the ball deflates and a dog runs on the field and then the ball gets kicked through the uprights? And, you know, we think up all these crazy scenarios. And this is great. The wheels are turning. However, we want to be productive with the what ifs. And so if you're asking us questions in class as we go, we want to help you mold your thinking process to figure out how to come up with that answer. What rule should we go to? The answer is not as helpful as how you get there. If we tried to memorize all the different answers to all the different scenarios that could ever happen, we'd have way too much in our heads and we'd be terrible officials. I'd be a terrible official. I have to come up with strategies because I'm not that smart to figure out, based on what happened, can I work through it in a methodical way to be able to come up with the correct answer after going through my process. Develop those frameworks, what definitions apply, what exceptions can I be looking for, etc. All right, so if you have any questions, that's really the bulk of what I wanted to talk about. Today was the rule book, the mechanics manual, some film. Throw your questions in the question and answer, the chat. I'd love to be able to answer them. If not, like I said, I'll put my email up later. But while you're thinking, if you've got any questions, I mentioned these last week, but I wanted to go over them again because they're fantastic. These are supplementary to the rulebook. Rule 11 officials, they've got a podcast, they've got a website, they put out a ton of rules tests and discussions. Most of it applies, 99% of it applies to what we do on a Friday night, Thursdays, all that good stuff. The Reading Study Guide is a long-hailed way to study the rules. So a lot of people have come up through Reading Study Guide. Grab one of those. Pretty much anywhere you find officiating gear, you can find this. And not required at all, but a helpful resource. Because Texas uses NCAA rules, we have the opportunity for TASO members to join the college football officiating website, and that's hosted on Arbiter Sports. So if you'd like the direct link to that, let me know. It's also embedded in this presentation, so when it gets posted, you can click on it. But you can join CFO for $40. You get access to rules tests. You get to hear announcements and videos put out by Steve Shaw, the National Coordinator of Football Officials for the NCAA. There's some replay things on there, obviously, that won't apply, but I found it's a great resource. Again, not required, supplementary, but it's supplemental, but it's a fantastic resource. And then we've already talked about the Football Officials Manual. This is required. Download that, get into it, and dig in. So make sure you follow us, Fort Worth Officials, FWFO on Twitter, Stripes in Action on Instagram, Facebook. We're out there. So our team's been doing a good job staying engaged. So make sure you follow us. And next week, we're going to talk a little bit about the people part of officiating. So the coaches, the players, other officials, a little bit more about kind of the moving up, the mentorship. You've got the other officials, you've got players, how do you talk to coaches, all that good stuff. So we've got a question coming in. I'm going to answer this here on the webinar. Thanks, Jalen. So Jalen's looking in the welcome packet when he joined, and he finds that there are divisions and classifications amongst officials. And so those points that you get to kind of move up those divisions and classifications, most of that depends on experience. And so anything from going to clinics, coming to meetings, and then working games, those will all get you points. Scoring a certain amount on the test, those will get you points. I talked a little bit last week. Points are not the end all be all. It's a helpful way to kind of classify, man, who's been officiating for how many years, how many games have you worked, all that good stuff. But I tell people there's a ton of Division I, which is the highest officials out there, Division I by TASO points, that have a lot to learn. And there's a ton of Division 3 and 4 officials who maybe they just don't have as many points, but they're ready to go. And so, you know, you don't want to focus 100% on points, but hopefully that helps with how those points are accumulated. So if you guys have any questions afterwards, please make sure to email me. My email is matthholmquist13@gmail.com. Love to answer any of those that you have. And hope you guys enjoyed it tonight. I'll be on for a little bit longer if you want to throw me another question, or if not, then we will see you next week.